Hello and welcome to this week's video. Today I'm going to walk you through my full process for painting this cat in Procreate, from the first block in right through to the final details. I'll be sharing the brushes I used, how I adjusted the colours to create a warmer, more cohesive feel, and the key techniques that really bring this piece to life. Let's get into it. This was the reference photo I used. I warmed the colours up a bit as I felt the original colours were a bit jarring. It gives the final piece much more warmth, but I'll talk about that in more detail later in the video. Before I show you the time-lapse video, let's look at the brushes I used. These were the wet acrylic, the turpentine, the stucco, the kombu and the technical pen. Notice these brushes all create different marks. This creates a sense of texture and interest in my brushwork. If you use all similar brushes, your brushwork will look boring. Also notice that the wet brushes, turpentine and acrylic, do not lay colour true. They lay selected colour lighter. This is important and I'll speak about it later in the video. Layers. I have painted this cat on 3 layers. The blocking is done on the first layer so I can take advantage of the wet brushes. The eyes are done on a separate layer and then the detail that gives the artwork a bit of polish is done on a new layer. If you are inexperienced, I suggest starting a new layer at every point you are happy with what you've done. This will split your process up and make it easier to delete a section when you've gone wrong. Drawing. A simple way to keep your drawing correct is to place your reference photo on its own layer. Start a new layer and draw around the obvious big shapes of your reference photo. You can then use this guide throughout your painting to check your drawing is correct. This will help you focus on your brushwork. If you want to practice your drawing, do your guide freehand. Selecting colour. I can place my reference photo on my artboard in the following way. Settings, Canvas, Reference Photo, Import. This will then allow you to select any colours in the reference photo by holding your finger on the photo. However, a word of caution. Remember that not all your brushes paint true. The oil brushes paint lighter, so you may need to adjust the colours you select by going darker, more saturated or perhaps more muted. Let's now have a look at my time-lapse video and I'll talk you through the important points of how to do this painting. Background. I've made a decision that I want my version to feel warmer, so I start with a warm orange-brown. I start my blocking over this colour with the wet acrylic and turpentine brush in transparent strokes. I am selecting a warm light value in the yellow colour picker and a cool light value in the blue colour picker. I'm then selecting a slightly darker blue and lay transparent strokes for my mid-tone areas. Notice how my transparent brushwork allows my brown to show through and the wet brushes pick up that darker warm brown and mix it into the overall effect. Blocking and value. I then start blocking in my cat. I am using the wet acrylic on about 80% transparency. Start off with average values and temperatures and then build up the detail. I use my technical pencil in the light warm value to outline my cat. Notice how sketchy my strokes are. You want your lines to look more like this and less like this. It will make your work look more arty. I then start to put in more of my obvious values, just building it up gradually in the transparent brushwork or with the wet acrylic. Notice how at this point the cat does have quite a bit of form and convincingly occupies the space with very little detail. I'm fiddling with the background as I know I need a bit of contrast between the two. I want variety in my brushwork, so I switch to my smudger tool in the wet acrylic and try to get rid of some of those background strokes. You have to be very careful with this and not overdo it. I then start a new layer and do the eyes. I use my wet acrylic, my stucco and my turpentine brush. The wet acrylic is used to get my blocks of colour in, so I am mapping out values, temperatures and colours in this. I then use the turpentine brush to pull the edges about. I use the stucco to give me a bit of grainy texture. Make sure you turn the opacity down to about 60 to 70%. The white highlights is done with either the kombu on the right eye or the wet acrylic on the left, where I use the turpentine to pull through my block colour. You will need to turn the opacity down in order to do this. Experiment with it. I then start a new layer and begin fleshing out the cat with a bit more detail. Big shapes, small shapes. You'll notice that I have only taken my detail so far, not as far as the photo. If you push your detail too far, you will end up with a big shape, small shape issue. What do I mean by this? The problem happens when we start to add our detail, the detail in our small shapes. So, for example, all these folds in the cat's skin, these are our small shapes. Our large shapes would be the head, neck and ears. In terms of hierarchy, big shapes are more important than small shapes. When we overemphasize these small shapes, they start to compete with our large shapes and our cat stops reading correctly. At this point, you will have a small shape issue. It is very easy to do. If this happens and you have started a new layer, delete the layer and have another go. If you have done it all on one layer, you can try undoing, or you can destroy the detail with a wet brush and re-establish those big shapes, then have another go. How would I avoid falling into this trap? I would suggest squint at your reference photo. If the detail disappears, then don't put it in. Edges. It is really important to create a variety of edges in this artwork. You need hard, soft and lost edges for the artwork to read correctly. You need to be really careful with your hard edges. Notice how I initially put my halo area in my block-in layer. I did this so that my detail layer would cover some of this brushwork, thus breaking up parts of those hard lines. It wasn't until the end that I went back and emphasised a few choice areas where the light was really bright. I also used my turpentine brush to break the edge where I felt it was too harsh. You have to be very careful with how you use the technical pen because the lines will be very hard. For a softer edge, I have used my wet acrylic. The smaller the stroke, the harder the line, but it will always give you a much softer edge than the technical pen. And you want to be really careful in those folds down here that you don't overdo your edges. Keep it loose and sketchy, otherwise your cat will begin to look cartoony. Brushwork. Brushwork won't make or break your painting. It is much more important to get your values correct. However, if you want a loose and painterly feel to your work, the key is to use a handful of brushes that all make different marks. Lay strokes over strokes and play about with opacity. The more variety of strokes I can add across my painting, the more interesting it will look to the viewer. To sum up, get the main values blocked in so the painting reads correctly. Do not overwork your small shapes. This is the fastest way to destroy your painting. Make sure you use a variety of edges in your work. Use a variety of brushes for interesting brushwork. If you would like to come and paint with me in oils, join my workshop on the 3rd of July. You'll find the link in the description below. There are also more details of lesson opportunities on my website sarahhallidayart.com. If you found this video helpful, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss future painting tips. Thank you for watching and see you next week.